All right. Hello, everybody. This is Nicolas. I'm your host for Hack Together, our live coding show for Typeform and semi-regular. Today, I'm very excited for what we're going to have. And before, because it's our tradition, what time it is? It's 10 a.m. in San Francisco. It's 1 p.m. in Miami. This is where I'm spending this week. So I'm on the East Coast time exceptionally. And it's 7 p.m. in Barcelona. This is where we were based, but it's 7 p.m. for Yann, who is joining us from Lille. Is that right?
Hi, Nico. Hi, everyone.
Sorry, it's sounding a bit like we're we're doing the time check everywhere. But very excited to have Yann on the show with us. I've known Yann for a couple of years. We met through this hackathon circle, conference circle, and he was doing a bunch of different things. And now, tell us more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so thank you, Nico, for having me. So my name is Yann. I'm a developer advocate at Qovery. So I will tell you more what Qovery is so we can understand what we're going to do. I've been backend developers for years, and lately, like for like maybe past 3 years, I transitioned towards the DevOps and SRE roles. And now I'm at Qovery and trying to preach the good word about like DevOps automation stuff and these kind of things.
Making the life of developers easier. Well,
Yeah.
thanks. Very excited to have you here. If you're joining, please let us know in the comments. We're looking at the comments if you have questions. And as you follow along what we're going to hack today, please leave some comments either on LinkedIn or on YouTube. Tell us where you're joining from. And I see we have Vladimir that is joining us from Barcelona. I see Romaric is here. Good to have you. So what are we going to hack today? I think I tried to tease this in the title. Like we're going to try to do something that we can call FormOps. I know like there was a lot of things around chat ops, like how you can optimize those things. What do you have in mind?
Yeah, like recently I started like wanting to like make fun things, surfing on this wave of everything ops. So we have DevOps, we have chat ops, we have AI ops, like everything ops. And so I was wondering what else could we use to kind of drive infrastructure and application deployments in the cloud. And so recently I started doing an experiment like driving application deployment with Notion, and I thought it would be very fun to do something with Typeform as well. So our goal for today will be to provision Strapi instance directly from a form. So we will like just create a simple type form like with a few fields, and we will be able to get our own Strapi instance running on Qovery. It's zero touch, no Qovery account like required, because it's more from the perspective of an open source project who would like to provide a cloud solution for his customers. So it's kind of a simple way to demonstrate how we can easily create like a form and allow customers to provision an instance on any project.
Exactly. Yeah. So that sounds very exciting. If we just go like a tiny bit of like what is Covery, what is your one sentence pitch, who is it for? Right now we're for this hack we're going to do stuff for open source maintenance, but I think you can use it if you're a startup, if you are a bigger company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the short answer is Qovery is a way to have something like Heroku on your own infrastructure. So AWS, Scaleway, or DigitalOcean. We have GCP and Azure coming later this year. And the longer answer is we provide a DevOps automation platform which allows you to give a simple interface to your developers to deploy their applications, but it's running on Kubernetes. And behind the scene, you have the full power of Kubernetes. It's your own cluster. You can access it, do anything you want on your cluster, install things on your cluster without Qovery if you have Helm charts, these kind of things. So we are really taking part of making easy the part where you need to deploy application on your Kubernetes cluster without being like a Kubernetes administrator or application developer, which is like quite intense.
Yeah, exactly. Take the complexity away. So let's get started, I guess. So again, we're doing this on the perspective of you're an open source maintainer, you have a project and you want to offer a simple environment for people to test and use. And we want this to be as simple as filling up a form with your details. So should I share, what should we do first? The form, the screen, like what should I do?
I think I could like show like the Qovery part. I set up something already, and so I can explain what I did. So we won't have anything to touch here, but just a few things so you understand. Like Qovery is built around the notion of project environments and applications. So here I created a project which is called FormOps Live Code. And in here, I have an environment which is called base env. And we see that this environment is stopped. So it means nothing is running in my Kubernetes cluster at the moment. I can show you we have a Kubernetes cluster on AWS here. So this is where we will deploy our application. It's a regular EKS cluster with Qovery agent and stuff installed. And so this base env is stopped, and we won't start it ever because there were many ways to provision applications on Qovery, but the simple one, since we want like new copies of Strapi, I created a base version of the deployment. So it's very simple. We have a Postgres database here and a Strapi which is deployed from a GitHub repository. So it's a fairly simple, like vanilla Strapi with nothing special in it. And this environment, we won't start it because on Qovery we have a functionality which is quite convenient, which is called clone. And so we can clone an environment and it will like replicate it automatically with all the same configuration. So I have a bunch of environment variables which are configured for making Strapi work. And so we don't want to reconfigure it all the time. We could override some of them if we needed. Like for example, the database will be a new one for every customer who will provision an environment. So
yeah, just one comment.
Yes.
We have one comment, and I think it's coming from Romeric, and I think he's right. Do you mind zooming a bit on your screen?
Of course. Is it
yeah,
better?
I mean, your designers have worked very hard on this UI, so make them proud.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah,
thank you.
Basically what we will do is through our API, we will like make clones of this environment and some customization. So as a customization, the simple one, I thought about adding a custom domain. So in the Typeform, we will be able to say, okay, I will add my own custom domain. And once we will submit the form, we will clone this environment, add the custom domain, start it. And when it's done, we will have our own Strapi instance running on our own custom domain. So hopefully we have time to go to this point. It should be okay, but yeah.
Yeah, time to make bets and see if we're going to make it there. I think you mentioned Strapi a lot, but people might not be familiar with Strapi as a product and as a project. Can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, so I picked Strapi because it's getting more and more traction lately, and it's a very cool product. It's basically a headless CMS, so it allows you to like everything like a WordPress would provide you. For example, you can customize it very much because you can create your own content types, etc. And on the other side, it gives you a REST API, or they have a plugin for GraphQL as well. And so you can like plug like any static site builder or whatever on top of it, like let's say Gatsby or Next.js or whatever, and like have it as a backend for your static content sites. And it can do like other things as well, but it's the main use case.
Cool. Yeah. So at the end of it, once the user had filled out this form, everything would have been provisioned for them, and at the end of it, they have their website, their own Strapi instance that they can customize with their own domain and all the contents.
Yes.
Sounds great.
Shall we start with the form, maybe?
Yeah, let's do this. I think this is probably the simplest part, but go ahead.
Okay, I should be comfortable with Typeform, but I might require your help here. But okay, so let's create a Typeform. I think I will create a blank one.
From scratch on the top. Yeah.
Oh, my bad. Yeah,
and I think
from
you will need to
scratch.
zoom it a bit as well. I don't know what. You have an impressive resolution. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so let's call it FormOps demo, for example, and I want, let's say,
this is for our own stats, so we don't need it.
Okay, so yeah, we can use the name because I imagine like we can redirect to a page where we will like be polite with the person and just like use his name, so we can keep this one, I guess. The second one I'm thinking about, so maybe I can delete it and create a new one. Since we want like a unique identifier for every instance deployed, I thought we could use the email address. It could be an interesting idea. So
it's also a good growth mechanic if you're an open source maintainer. Like you want to keep addresses so you can keep your community. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, so we have an email address, and so I think we could add like for the custom domain.
You're being very nice and making people decide. I'm sure we can add some filters. You can use Typeform logic to add some filter and making sure there are some words that are not used. But that will be for another time. Awesome. Yeah, I think that with this, you already have the good base. Yeah.
So I think we're okay for the form. Well, are you thinking about something else?
No, I think this is good for now. I think you're ready and you can just publish it. I think we are on the top, right? I think the next thing that once we're now is like taking care of the API stuff on Qovery side. But I think we'll check about what happens once the form is submitted and what do we tell the user.
Okay, so shall we? Okay, so to connect to Qovery, I guess I should zoom here as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, cool. So what we will need here is like kind of a way to bridge the Typeform and the Qovery API. So I was thinking about creating a Node.js application for that. We will use Nest.js because it's a cool framework. It's a bit overkill. We could have just done a basic Express, but I like using TypeScript, and so.
And you come with your own tooling, but everybody can choose what they want. I think what we're going to demonstrate will work regardless of the language or the framework that you use, because you have APIs that are HTTP APIs, right?
Absolutely, we have an HTTP API, and so you can use absolutely any stack you want for that. So we're just using Node.js here, but you could use like anything.
Awesome.
We even consume our APIs with Rust, so we can.
Tell us in the comments, like what is your favorite framework at the moment, or the programming language that you're using right now. And I'm sure Yann will be like, yes, we covered this. Yes, we covered this. So this small app, what it's going to do is going to listen for new form submissions, right?
Yes, it's gonna listen for new form submissions, and then so we will have like several calls to do to the Qovery API, but it will get the Typeform response and do the calls to our API to clone first. The different step we will have is first we will clone the environment. Then we will like get the application, the Strapi application from this environment, so we can add a custom domain to it, and we will then start the environment and wait for it to be created. So what we could start with is here we have a controller. So just let's check everything works fine. So let's do a yarn dev. It's a yarn start dev, I think.
And then you can probably zoom in the VS Code too.
Yep. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So Nest.js, for those who don't know, it's based on Express. It's there are some concept, but it's basically, if you are familiar with the Express, it should be okay. I can zoom here as well, but right now we just have a hello world, not much. So it corresponds to the get route we have here, and so we will create a new route for getting our Typeform submission. So I guess Typeform is doing a post request, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we have some annotations. It's inspired by Angular, and so you can annotate like methods like that. So instead of, it's a bit different of the way of declaring with Express, but what we are doing here is we are creating a new post endpoint, and we can choose, for example, let's call the endpoint submit. Why not? And here we will declare a new handler, submit. This I will fill later. And right now, let's return an empty response, and we will just try to see what we get from Typeform, so we can console.log. Sorry. Our body. And so where will our body come from? We have another annotation to parse like the parameters we get from our API. So we have another annotation called body. And so here we can, I don't need the fat arrow here. Here we can say, okay, at body and say body. So this will like, and it's, sorry. And so this will like get the body from the request directly and pass it to a body variable. So here we can see what we get from the Typeform submission. And
Nice.
if we want to see it properly, I could even do something like that, stringify, because otherwise we won't see all the content of the request. So what I'm doing here is I'm just like displaying the whole JSON response and formatting it so we can understand what happens. So what we could do is bind the Typeform to the application and see if it works. Since I'm running locally, what we will need to do is to create a tunnel on my machine so it can be accessible from the outside. So there are several tools we could use for that, but here I will use one called ngrok. And so what I'm doing here is I'm forwarding the local traffic, HTTP traffic on port 3000 and exposing it on the internet. So Typeform will be able to call directly my Node.js service from the internet to my local machine. So here I'm opening a tunnel, and so we can see here that this will be forwarded to my local machine. So if I'm opening this URL, I can see that it still access my hello world. So I guess now we can do, is it in connect?
Create the webhook.
I guess.
Yes, connect webhook.
Connect webhook.
Yeah, webhooks on the top. On the top.
Oh yeah, my bad.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we add a webhook here.
And I think it was /submit.
It was /submit. Okay. Okay, and I can enable it. Is that it?
Yeah, so now I guess you can submit your first response to your form.
Okay, let's try. Oh, my bad. Let's accept to be tracked.
Oh yeah, that's a new thing that we have, telling people that we are dropping cookies or tracking some of their stuff. Oh, you're very precise about the form, the domain that you want.
Yeah, because I have a domain like with that, and so we'll be able to test. Okay, so I should have received something. Okay, indeed, I see. This is the response I get. Maybe I will just like save it somewhere, so
yeah,
I can refer to it. So I will just store it here. Okay. So what we'll be interested in is, I guess, the definitions. We don't really care. What we will want is the answers. And so we see here, like what we will need is a text or email or text part of it. So, okay. So first thing to do is to extract our answers from this body. So let's declare a variable for that we call answers. And so we will need, so to take from the body, it was form response, answers. And since we are interested only in the text and email field here, we can map on that to get an array. Since we already know the order of the question, do you confirm that the order will always be the same as the form, whatever happens?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so what we can do here is map on that. And let's say any, so it will be happy. And so we will get, so the problem is we once it's called text, another time it's called email, but fortunately in the field type here, we have the type, in the type here, we have the type of the field, which gives us like the key we need. So for type email, we have email. For type text, we have text. So we are able to do, I guess, something like that. Sorry, like that.
Exactly. Yep.
And from that, we will create an object. So in Nest.js, there is kind of slight Java Enterprise touch. So they are using things called DTOs, which would be called form objects in other communities or things like that. So let's create a DTO for that, which will just be a simple like type to say, okay, we want to pass it's the shape of the object we want to use to create our stuff later. So let's call it, for example, create instance .dto.typescript. And so my create instance DTO will look like that. So it's a simple class. We create instance DTO. So we had I forgot the name of my fields already.
So you had a name.
I don't care. We had. Let's call it name, which will be a string. We had an email, which will be a string as well. And we had the domain, which will be a string. Okay. And so from here, we can build this object. And let's call it, for example, params, since we will use it with a service as a params for a service later. It will be a create instance DTO type. And so we had name. So it will be the first element in our array of answers.
You had a typo on line 16 on answers. I think it's missing an S, but it's okay because it does the autocomplete for you.
Where? Yes.
The way you called it.
Good catch. Here it will be answers of 1, and finally we had like domain, and it will be answers of 3. For those not familiar with TypeScript, the advantage of using TypeScript for that is if I'm doing a typo somewhere, I will straight away see that my proprietary domain doesn't exist on my type, so it avoids a lot of errors, and that's why we are creating a DTO. It's pretty cool. And let's return here the params for now, so we see. We can see now since it
doesn't really matter because you return this to Typeform just to tell us that well, you received it.
Let's just like console log to make sure like it's shaped as we would like, and maybe we can try like once again something.
Yeah, so I'll show you if you go into the webhook interface on Typeform, you can see the payload and resend it too. But yeah, feel free to submit it again.
That's cool. Okay, we'll do that. I was not aware of that. Okay, so we have exactly what we want. So we got the thing. So you said if I go in my webhook here
and do deliveries, view deliveries.
View deliveries. That's actually very, very great. I didn't know that we have that. So if I redeliver here,
it will send the same payload.
Yes. Very great. Okay, perfect.
Right.
Cool. Okay.
So we're done the part of extracting the data from Typeform, getting the name, email, and domain. I think now is where the real magic happens, is like connecting it with the Qovery API, right?
Yes. So Nest.js use services, which is just another class to implement the actual business logic. We could do everything in the controller, but let's try to be like clean developers. And so here we will create a method that we can call from our controller to actually process like the params we got. So let's declare a new method. It will be async because we will call the Qovery API, and let's call it, for example, create instance, because we will create a new instance of Strapi. it will return a promise of, let's say any for now, because I'm not sure what type I will return for now. And so what we know is, as parameters, we will want to take the objects that we created earlier. So it will be our of type create instance DTO. And so now there will be several steps. So as we said, the first step is to clone the environment. So first step, we want to clone environment. So how do we clone the environment? We can call the Qovery API. So we have a TypeScript SDK, but we won't really need it for that because we are doing something very simple. Instead, we will use Axios to do the calls to the API directly. So let's add Axios to our project. So Axios is a popular library for doing HTTP calls with Node.js or even client side. And I will also add another package because since we will need like API tokens and things like that to call the Qovery API, we will use environment variables. And so Nest.js provides a package for that to handle like .env files. So let's add it to our project. And so first thing, we will want to create a .env file. My bad. Okay.
Yeah, because the recommendation here is to not have any of your credentials hard-coded into the code.
Yeah, absolutely. Like never hard code your credentials, and this .env file always make sure it's added to gitignore because you don't want it on your version control manager either. So I ignore it. So if I push my project to Git, I'm sure it won't be there. And so what we will want
so this is where we're going to put like the API key, I guess.
Yes, so we will need the an API token. So let's call it like Qovery API token. And we will need an environment ID. So basically, we will want to clone an environment. So this environment. And so our API will need to know the ID of this environment to clone it because we will pass it to the API. And so to find the environment ID on Qovery, it's pretty simple. In the URL, you look after environments here. You go there and you just copy this value. So we will basically say, okay, make a clone of the base env which has this ID. And so let's call it like Qovery environment ID. And so for the Qovery API token, I can generate one with our CLI. So we have a command called Qovery token, and maybe I will do it offline and fill it.
I hide your screen. So
secret shield, perfect. Okay, so just let me copy my API token and we'll be good.
Because if people had this API token, then they could create stuff on your account and provide like use your AWS credentials and your credits, and that could be very harmful.
Absolutely.
Mining some Bitcoin somewhere, I guess.
Okay.
You good?
We're good. Okay,
right.
cool. So once we do that, to read the values from the environment file, we need in our application module here to import the config module from Nest.js. So, okay, let's config module dot for root, which means we are using this module for the whole application, because in Nest.js you can have like several modules to really separate your application by domain, domain-driven style. Here we will just use the simple module, but you can choose if you want to configure a module only for something only for your one module or for your whole application. So here we say for root. And so now we will be able to read our env file, accessing it anywhere in the project with process.env.my variable name, because it was actually loaded. My bad, sorry. Okay, so in our service, what we want to do is first have a way to access the API. So how do we use Axios? We could like repeat our credentials, our token like all the time, but it would not be very convenient. So instead, what we can do is create a client with everything which will be common to all the requests. So I can add a constructor here to my service. And in this constructor, we can do something like, let's say, let's create oh, I already had a constructor, my bad. Didn't see it. Okay, so let's. I'm in the controller. Bad file. Okay. Sorry, that's where I wanted to go. Okay. So in the service constructor, and in this constructor, let's create a private member, which would be like a Qovery client. And so here we will say this dot Qovery client equals, and so we will need Axios. We need to import it. Import Axios from Axios. So we installed it with Yarn a bit earlier, and we can create a client. And what this client will need here is to take a base URL. So the base URL of the API. So this will be https api.qovery.com and the headers. And the headers, we will need only one header. Wait, yes, sorry, Nico.
No, you're just teaching me something. I didn't know you can do this, so I guess you can reuse it all everywhere, and you don't have to specify the headers and the base all the time.
Yes, absolutely. And we will need the authorization one. And the authorization one, and so it will be token, and here, so here we can access with process.env the env variables we declared in the .env file, and so it was Qovery API token. Okay, here
nice.
is, and now we have a client that we will be able to use like anywhere for all the requests we are making.
That's pretty cool.
Okay, so to clone the environment, so we can check like the Qovery documentation. So if I go to, let's put it in the beginning, apidoc.qovery.com. And here I type clone. So I see here the endpoint for the clone environment. It's a post endpoint. Okay, let's copy this. and it will take as a payload the name of the new environment. And we have other options. The mode we don't care about, and the cluster IDs, because on an organization you can have several clusters, and so I could choose in the same project to deploy one environment in a cluster or another environment on another cluster. So for an open source project that wants to provide like hosting for its customer, which that means is we could let the customer choose from the form if he wants to run on a shared cluster or if he wants an enterprise plan with his own cluster. And so we could like add steps to create a new EKS cluster and deploy his project on his own cluster. So that's something we could do. But here, this one is optional as well. So the only one we will use is the name.
Nice.
Okay, so well, I will only need this part. So let's say const API endpoint is this. And so the environment ID is coming from process.env.qovery environment ID. And so now I just need to call the API with the params we talked about earlier, so which was name. So this dot
new comments from Arnaud. This looks awesome. Yeah, you're right, Arnaud. We're just building it as we're going. We're halfway. Sorry. I want to give you some shout outs at Yann.
Yay. Okay, so we are posting to the API endpoint, and the payload will be name. I said name, and so the name will come from params.name. Okay, and so here I can do nothing. I will just return an empty object for now. And so what we can try is see if we actually, we just put an underscore so it doesn't complain. It still complains. So let's say right now I don't get the result. We will await, obviously. Okay. And so now we can test to resubmit the form and see if we are actually creating a clone on Qovery. So here, if I go here, I see I only have my base env. So let's go to Typeform, like redeliver. So this one was
that was your gibberish one, I think.
Okay, so we want the other one. No, this is, yeah, this is the right one.
Sorry.
So
that was a good one.
Let's redeliver this one. My app didn't crash, which is a good thing. And if I refresh here, seems we don't have anything yet. Oh yeah, because you know what? If we don't do anything, if we never. Okay, so what we want to do is this .app service .create instance and pass the params, because if we don't call it, we don't get anything, which makes sense. So now I'm calling my service, and now it should do something, actually. My bad. Sorry, go back here.
Yeah, so if you switch tab, I think if you go back to the, yeah, and then come back to this and redeliver it, yes, perfect. I think we may have a view.
And now if I refresh, I see I have an environment with my name. Actually, I think we'd better like call the, instead of using name, we could use email, so we are sure it's unique. And so I would have my email address as the name of the environment. But okay, this part is working. We can check, like we have like the Strapi and Strapi Postgres running. This environment is not created, sorry, because this environment is ready, but it's not running. We could like deploy it. but we will do it programmatically because we can set other things before starting it, like for example, the custom domain. So right now, let's just remove it. And okay, so next, okay, let's add our custom domain. So what we can do if we don't want to have a huge method here is create separate methods for each step. So here, clone env, for example, and it will need the email, which is a string. Okay, and move this over here. Here only need email, and if we want a way to not complain here, we need to declare our method as async. Okay, and so here we can just do await this dot clone env of params dot email. And if we want to get fancy, we could even do something like that: name, email, and domain, and just pass email here.
So as we go, you make the code cleaner. This is awesome. more readable, cleaner, less mess. Perfect.
Yeah, I like clean code up to a point where when I have enough, and then I don't care anymore. But okay, so just let me think. What we want to do is add the, yep,
the domain, right?
Okay, so let's create a similar method here that we can call, like, for example, add custom domain. And what it will need is an application ID. So let's check the API doc. And if I see add custom domain to the application, I see that I will need an application ID. So how do I get an application ID? So we cloned the environment, but in the environment, I have an application and I don't have the ID of this application. So I would need a way to find the applications in my environment. So if I look here, I can list applications here, and I see that I can list all applications in an environment this way. So okay, so before adding a custom domain, I know that I will need another method to list applications. Since I will have only one, let's say, okay, get application ID. I will need here an environment ID, which is a string. I know that I will return a string. Since it's async, I want to return a promise of a string. Okay, let's do this. I said that it was environment ID applications, like that. But here it won't be like Qovery environment ID because we want the ID of the clone and not the original one. So it will be env ID. And so here it will be a get request with no body because I just want that. Okay, so the response, and what we want to return is a response.data. It should be called results. And since we only have one application, we will return like the first one. Easy. Okay. And so here the environment. How do we get the environment? So when we clone the environment, we get the ID. If I can check here to show you clone environment. In the response, we get the ID of the new environment. So here we want to get that. So the result of our clone environment, and we want, so here it will be promise of string as well. And we want to get result.data.id. Yes.
So is this in the create instance or the clone environment? I feel like you.
Oh, sorry. Oh yeah,
Do you want this to happen in the clone environment function?
I want this to happen in the clone environment function. My bad. Okay. Yes, you're right.
So live coding with more pair of eyes is like pure programming.
Fortunately, I've been a teacher because otherwise I'd be lost. Like first time is always very, very hard, like to explain and write code at the same time. So here we want to return, so return res.data.id. Okay, cool. Why are you complaining about email? Cannot find email because syntax error here. And so here we want to, so here let's say that we don't return anything from here. And so here, the clone ID will be will be just no. Let's just do simpler clone ID. It will be enough. Okay. So now I can get my application. So const app ID equals get application ID, which takes like the clone ID. Okay. And with that, we will be able.
No?
Sorry?
Do you want to await for it?
I want to await for it, absolutely. I always forget the await, and it's so hard to debug. I'm not really a JavaScript developer originally, so
I understand.
Yeah. Okay, so add the custom domain. So here, this is not the environment ID we want. We want so the email, but we want like the env ID as well. Nope, I want an application ID. What am I doing? So we said like domain, add custom domain to the application. So we want an application ID here. So let's do it. Yep. Application ID. We'll just shorten it to app ID to be coherent. And so, which is a string. And so here we post to the API endpoint, and the payload is the domain, and it's here, it's domain. And I can just avoid like repeating, because JavaScript, if I don't like put the key value, it will automatically decide that the key and the value have the same name and do it for me, in case you're not familiar with this. Okay, so this should allow me to add my custom domain. So now let's do it.
Not here. You're in a clone environment.
Sorry, what do you mean?
You were editing the clone environment
Yeah.
option. I thought you wanted to do it.
No, I want to call the add custom domain directly
just right
from
away.
here. Yeah, from the clone environment, I will call sequentially all the private methods I'm creating. So it's kind of like our main. The purpose of the clone env is just to call like. No,
Okay.
I'm just. No, you're absolutely right. I'm just saying nonsense, and it's in create instance that I want to do it. You're absolutely right, and it's my bad.
Don't worry, don't worry.
Okay, and so add custom domain. I want to pass it app ID and domain. Okay, and so let's try it. So here I only have my base env. I can go there, redeliver my payload. It didn't crash, did it? It crashed.
404.
Because 404. Okay, so I have a clone. Okay, so okay. Okay, let's try to. No, maybe we will do with. Okay.
The nice way. Console log everywhere.
Yeah, it will be faster than trying to launch a debugger for. Okay, so.
Exactly.
This is my clone ID. Clone ID.
And I see that Vladimir is still watching us, and he says you're explaining things excellently. So thanks for watching. Thanks for following with us.
Yes, thank you. So this will be app ID. App ID. If we don't want to have a conflict with no. Yeah. Okay. Because now I'm deploying the environment, so I can't remove it until it's deployed. Because to avoid like having inconsistent state, since it's Kubernetes, you can do like crazy things like you would do like on Heroku or whatever because of the declarative nature of Kubernetes. So you can't interrupt these kind of things until the state is stable. So I will have to fill another form with a different email. Okay, my name is still Yann, so my address email, let's say. This one doesn't exist, but I.
Right now, we're not sending any emails, so it's fine.
Nope. Okay, I submit this. And so my clone ID is this. So let's check my clone ID C20D9. Okay, sounds good. And why do I fail on get application ID? Because environment ID applications. And so this gives me a 404. Interesting.
Do we have the right API endpoint?
Environment. Oh, wait. I think the endpoint is application singular from list applications. Oh, it's application singular. My bad. My bad. Okay.
So that's an interesting feedback for the API because it can have more than one application as a result, right?
Yeah, like
the
it's a matter
API.
of naming convention, but yeah, it's true that maybe we can think about it someday. Okay, so let's delete again. So if I was really developing against an API, I would have test, I would mock the API to avoid like doing all this thing. But right now we are like kind of hacking, so it's okay. So if I deliver the payload, okay, let's do it properly. Okay. Oh, half properly. I will keep the whole error. It will be a bit much, but okay. Okay, let's do it again. It's kind of annoying that we have to remove the end everything every time, but it's fine. Okay, it was our last payload. Let's redeliver it. So it's not here that I have a create error.
Yeah, looks like it's on the first one. Clean environment.
Why would I have? Oh, maybe it's add custom domain who is failing.
Ah, yes, because yeah, if this one was not failing, it wouldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's probably something very stupid.
It's always like this.
Okay, so let's. Okay. Yep. And now it's not failing. Well, are you serious? Okay, it did nothing. Did we?
Did you redeliver it? Yeah. Ah.
Okay. This time it's okay. So.
Object. I think it's in the URL. I think I saw a / object.
Did you see something?
Yeah, I see.
Ah, yeah, here. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Because app ID. Okay, so when I get the application ID, I might not be. Okay, yes, of course, because I need to return ID here.
So we told you it was something simple and stupid.
Yeah. And that's the problem when working with TypeScript and REST APIs. If we don't like add extra types to ensure like REST APIs are not typed, contrary to GraphQL, and so we would not have this kind of issues with GraphQL APIs because we could ensure the type of the response, and so it would have detected that I was not returning a string but instead an object. But yeah, since we don't type our API responses. Okay, so I want to redeliver, and this time it should work. Hopefully.
Didn't complain.
Okay, so here we have our environment, and if I go to my application and I go to settings, domain, I can see that my custom domain was added. So we good. Yay. So we good. last thing we will want to do is to actually start our environment. And so to start the environment, we will like create one last method. Okay, async start environment. And start environment will need an env ID. And okay, so how do we start the environment? Let's check the API. So environment actions. And so I can see I have deploy an environment here. And so it's a post request on this endpoint with no payload. Okay, so same as usual, const API endpoint equals this. Interpolate env ID. And so we will just like await this dot Qovery client dot post API endpoint. And I should like try catch, etc. But it's for demo purpose, it will be okay. And so here I can, sorry, it's here and here.
So the custom domain, yeah.
Because, yeah, when adding a custom domain, since it's making changes on Kubernetes, we need to redeploy the application to reapply all the changes to the cluster. So if we were starting the application before adding the custom domain, we would need to wait until the end of the deployment and redeploy the application. So it's better to, that's why we are not starting the application directly when you create it. So you can configure everything you need on your environment before actually starting it. Deploying on Kubernetes takes a little bit more time than on some like regular paths. So we are trying to optimize this part. And we are working hard on improving the deployment time as well, but it's still a bit long for now. And so this dot start environment, and so it will be our clone ID. And let's do it once again. I remove it. Okay, and I can resubmit, and let's cross fingers. It should be starting if everything is fine. So yeah, I have my new environment with a queued deployment. So that's basically it for the Qovery part, and so now it's taking a bit of time to deploy, but once it will be, I will have it available on my custom domain. So my domain was how did I call my domain? It was view deliveries. I'm too old. I have no memory. It was form.dev. And so
but it hasn't deployed yet, so you shouldn't have it anything, right?
I could like just add a Cname this way. So if I go to DNS manage records, I can add a Cname record here. So it was form, just form. And to get like if I check for my domain here in show DNS, I see the value I need to provide. And I can add record. And so now once it will be deployed, I will be able to access my app on this one. So basically we could, I don't know if we have the time for that, and it's not Typeform nor Qovery related, so I can explain how we could do like the rest just conceptually. What we could do here is, if I'm not mistaken, Typeform can redirect to a page at the end of the process.
Yeah,
so
after submission. Yeah.
So we could like create a new endpoint with a webhook listening from Qovery. So Qovery is not handling webhooks for now. We are implementing them, but right now we are not sending triggering webhooks when the application is deployed. But I created something called Captain Hook here, which is a simple API. You can find it on my GitHub if you're interested. So L0CK3 Captain Hook. And so it's a simple API which allows you to simulate a webhook on any API endpoint. And so you can create trackers. So you can just like create tracker. You say, okay, I want to track this URL. You can pass headers and stuff. And every time it will poll the endpoint every, like here, for example, in the example, we are polling every 10 seconds. And if the response changes, it will be able to forward the payload of the request to an endpoint you specified. So you get a virtual webhook, but your application can get webhooks as if like the API was implementing them. So I deployed that on Qovery. It was ready to use. And so we could like listen to, here we have an endpoint, which is application status, get application status, where we get the current state of the application in the response. And so I could like plug a tracker of Captain Hook on this endpoint, and I would get always the same response until the state changes, and then it would forward the new payload to our application. And so what we could do is store in a database the application we create. So every time we create a new instance here, we could store the params in the database, and this would allow us to create a page where we are redirected to from Typeform, which would show like the information, like the current status of the application, and also like directly the Cname record you need to add to your DNS provider. Since as a user of this, you don't have access to the Qovery console. Here we are accessing it to check that everything is going well, but you would not have it as a user of the Typeform. And so we could like show you the DNS record you need to add to make it work with your custom domain. And so when the Qovery would trigger the webhook, we could update the record in the database, and we could even get fancy and add WebSockets so the status changes automatically on the page. So we could do all kind of crazy things. And so in the end, you would only fill your form, get to a page, wait for it to tell you it's ready, put your CNAME, and you would have like your instance of Strapi. So the one we tried is still deploying, but since we mistakenly deployed another one earlier, we'll be able to check how it looks like. So if I open this and I go to admin, not admin, here I have my Strapi instance, and so I could like.
And this is the first step of like setting it up, having your admin account and all stuff.
Yep.
So it's real. It has been deployed. It works. And I think here you demonstrate well how this could benefit some open source maintainers that want to open like either a demo environment or like or an easy cloud offering without having to do much work on their side.
I might not do that. Okay. So I don't know if I think we can stop here for the live code part.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any questions.
Yes.
I think there were a few people joining, but thanks for sharing this, and I think like thanks for opening up like what are the next steps as well, and like how people can manage it and do it at scale. And I think you can even have a service like if you want to be your own hosting provider, you can have a service where you decide like there's a multiple choice question where people are like which type of things you want to deploy. And now you have like a bunch of open source projects. So you can also personalize the type form to make people pick. I'm sure if you find some other APIs, you can personalize more. What is in the, because right now we don't modify like the name of the Strappy website, but we can like through config file, I'm sure we can do a bit more stuff too. But yeah, really cool. Yeah, thanks you all for joining. I see Vladimir really loved it. So thanks for being around. Thanks for looking into this. If you want to watch it, if you want to see this again, you can go it and then step by step look at what Yann has done. I think the code is quite simple and like we're going step by step so people can understand. You can use the API if you're not using directly JavaScript or Node or TypeScript that you're using. Use the API directly, but the principle is the same. And then we're probably gonna document this somewhere on a blog post. So if you don't like watching videos, you can do that by reading it. If we want to follow you, if you want to learn about the next project you're building, the crazy next startups that you're building, how we do this? Where do we find you?
Yeah, actually, you can easily get me on Hashnode, for example, which is where I blog. So Hashnode, it's l0ck3.hashnode.dev. You can, of course, like ping me on Twitter, which is like the same, but with 2 Ks. So for Hashnode, it's only 1 K. For Twitter, it's 2 Ks because only 1 K was taken, unfortunately. And also find me on LinkedIn. So if you were watching on LinkedIn, it's pretty easy to find me. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time for another hack together. Submit some ideas if you want to see some stuff built, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.